الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So we left off on ayah number 14. زين للناس حب الشهوات من النساء والبنين والقناطير المقنطرة من الذهب والفضة والخيل المسومة والأنعام والحرث. And we discussed the whole idea of what is shahwa, what are our desires and how they are innate in us. They're not really problematic, and the proof of that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that our shahwa are destined to be fulfilled, but they are destined to be fulfilled in Jannah. Right? وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسَكُمْ. Among many other ayat of the Quran that we mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in Jannah, literally two words that are used, وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي. Tashtahi is from shahwa. It is a verbal form of it, and it means basically that those things that you desire. And of course, أنفسكم. Anfus is the jama or the plural of nafs. Normally, obviously, this is why I discussed this last week, because most of the time, whenever, at least as Muslims, whenever we hear a discussion of shahwa or nafs, the connotation is almost always negative. Correct? Am I right or am I wrong?
Yes.
Almost always, right? If shahwa, desires, or nafs is mentioned, the connotation is almost always negative. However, that's not necessarily the case. It's not shahwa or nafs in and of themselves that are negative. It is how they are applied or in what they are related to. So the nafs in another context is not disparaged, but it is actually praised. And this, I'm sure it's an ayah that most of you have heard at some point in time, Surah Al-Fajr. Ya ayyatuha nafs al-mutma'innah. The word nafs is used, right? Nafs. Oh, or you can say that soul. Allah Ta'ala is addressing the human soul here. That is mutma'innah. Okay? Which is, ulama have actually now made it something technical. Mutma'innah literally comes from itminan. So the contented, or the content soul, the content soul. So what does that mean? Content with Allah, content with the commandments of Allah. So that human soul, that nafs, the word when I'm using here, you understand? The word nafs in this ayah, its context is positive, and its context is one of praise. What am I trying to say? That in reality, nafs and shahwa are not in and of themselves bad, but it's all about the context in which they are used. So in one breath, Allah is saying that the nafs here is something to be what? Irji'i ila rabbika radiyatan mardiyah. Return to your Lord in a state that you are pleased and Allah is pleased with you. So the nafs is not being disparaged here, but is being what? Being praised. That human soul, that nafs, which is mutma'innah, which is content with Allah, Allah is content with it. So what does it prove? The whole point I'm making here. That the word nafs, although we normally use it in a very negative connotation, but it does not necessarily have a negative connotation. It is all relative to what that nafs is. Same thing with shahwa. Shahwa is not negative in and of itself. It's all relative to how and where we use that shahwa. Okay? It's negative when it's used in terms of what? Let me go back to the ayah. It's negative when it's used ذَلِكَ مَتَعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. It's negative when those desires are used in context with this world. But it's not negative when used in context to what?
Allah's commandments.
No, not even that. Normally Allah's commandments, it's all about a test, right? The commandments are to test us. The awamir are in order. So tests usually are not according to what we want, correct? Otherwise it's not a test. Right? If you want to test your children, for instance, their loyalty or their whatever it may be, you're not going to do something that they like normally. You're going to ask them to do something they don't want, like chores. And once they perform the chores, and you say shabash, right? Then you may give them what they want. It is no different. It's a very simple example, but it's no different. So it's not test. Shahwa is negative in its connotation to the dunya, and we'll explain that. It's actually in the word itself. ذَلِكَ مَتَاعٌ. It is mata'. Now, who has ever heard the word mata' before? It's repeated often in the Quran, so I'm sure you've heard it. Interestingly enough, the very controversial subject of muta' comes from the same root. What is muta'? Temporary marriage. So, how is it related? قُلْ تَمَتَّعُوا. And many other ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet ﷺ to tell those people who deny the hereafter, enjoy yourselves for a little bit of time. تَمَتَّعُوا literally means, okay, enjoy yourselves for a little. Do whatever you want for now, but eventually you'll see the end result of all of that. All the partying that you do now, you'll see eventually in a very short time what is going to be the end result of that. So mata' literally, how is it related to muta'? Because, let's put it this way, and I'll try to bring this subject together in a meaningful way. It'd be very cruel, correct, if someone were to, whether male or female, were to take your heart and promise you all these things, right? Promise you the sun and everything else, as people do when they try to beguile people, right? When they try to lure them in, they promise them the whole world. As they say, you promised me, have you ever heard that lover songs? You promised me the world. But the whole entire time, they had no intention of being dedicated to you at all. They were going to leave you all. The whole time, they had the intention to do what? To leave you. How cruel would that be? Mata'al ghurur is another way Allah uses the dunya. It is a very deceptive mata', meaning it does the same thing, and this is shaitan's trick. Promises you everything, but it had an intention from the very beginning that it's not going to stay with you. Now, how would you view a person who did that to you? How would you feel about them? Wouldn't be too happy with them, would you? You promised me the world the entire time you had intention of leaving me. So this is what it's related to. You understand? The dunya, mata'al ghurur, it means the same thing. Or here, mata'al hayat al-dunya, meaning it's the same thing. The promises and the hopes that this short-lived life gives you, but knowing the whole time that it was never, ever going to stay with you. So who is the sucker? So excuse me for using that language, but let's put it that way. Who is the fool?
The one who believed.
The one who believed in, knowing that they're a player the whole time, right? That they had no intention of being dedicated or giving you anything. Right? They had no intention. And by saying player, I don't just mean the men, it can go both ways, right? And why do you think that the shuyukh always used, like Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi in his poetry, always used human relationships of romance and things like that to denote spiritual things? Because it works the same way. It has to do with the human heart. Okay? So when the heart is beguiled by someone or something, it promises them the world and everything else, but it had no intention to fulfill that promise. Right? Now, obviously, you would develop a lot of resentment towards it. Correct? How would you feel about that person that toyed with your emotions and promised you everything, but had no intention whatsoever to do anything for you? So if that's the case, understand that the dunya is no different. It promises you everything. But in this case, actually, it's even more amazing, because everyone who was born in this world, was already promised that they're going to die. So actually, you have no one to blame but whom? Yourselves, for actually believing that the dunya was ever going to do what? Was ever going to fulfill its promises to you. Okay, and that's why it's called mata'. Okay, it's just there for a period of time, not any longer. And anything that is not willing to dedicate itself to you, anything that is not willing to be there for you, then in reality that thing should be considered bad. Let's use that word, which is a point I wanted to make. Some shuyukh have gone so far to say that even the concept of what is good and what is bad, it gets so deep, it goes beyond the temporal world, and they say that al-khayr al-mutlaq, what is absolutely good is that which stays. And what is absolutely bad, ash-sharr al-mutlaq, is that which goes. Nothing that is temporary can be called what? Good. Only that which remains can be called good in reality. And who is the only being that remains? Al-Baqi, Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, so shahwa is not a bad thing unless it is related to what? When it becomes enamored of this world. And that's why Allah says after that, Wallahu indahu husnul ma'ab. And with Allah is the most excellent of all returns. Meaning, absolute good is with that which remains. Not with that which promises you everything and never had intention to give it to you and never had intention even to be loyal to you or dedicated to you or anything. The ultimate player, it's called the dunya. Right? Give you every promise you want to hear, but had no intention of doing it from the very beginning. You understand? Every promise you want to hear, but had no intention of doing any of it. This is why it's Shaitan's favorite tool. Right? Because this is what he wants. He wants our hearts and our minds and our shahwa to be related to those things which have no good in it whatsoever. Meaning, mata'al hayatid dunya. Whereas Allah, He's saying, with me, you have the most excellent of return. So if your shahwa is there, I created it. In other words, zuyyina linnas. Who gave us these desires to begin with? Did you ask for it? Did you wake up one morning and say, you know what? I want to be filled with desires. Did you? No, it's not your choice. It is something you have been innately created with. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically is waking us up. Your desires are fine. But don't let your desires be taken to the extent that they drive you to something which is no good in it whatsoever. If they drive you towards me, then I promise you I'll give you husnul ma'ab, an excellent return, meaning that those desires are meant to be fulfilled. That's why I created them. But it is relative. Relative, again, nafs and shahwa, the negative or positive connotation is all in relation to either one thing or the other. Meaning, if it is related to Allah, it's all good. If it's related to other than Allah, then it's no good. And that's why Allah mentions in this ayah too, almost some shuyukh have said that pretty much show the sum total of everything in this world is mentioned in this ayah. Right? And the nisa'u wal banin or al banoon, that's a technical. Min al nisa'i wal banin, that women and children have to do with our own species. Correct? I hope so. I hope we're not going for spouses and children outside of the species. Right? That doesn't, although who knows where we're going with all of this. Maybe that'll happen in the future too. I don't know, the way that humanity is. You never know. Who knows where we're going with it. But normally, right, in normal circumstances, we're talking about the same species. So that's one category, right? We have our own genus. Right, our own species. Then what? وَالْقَنَاطِيرُ الْمُقَنْطَرَةِ. These are wealth that is mentioned specifically مِنَ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ. So dhahab and fidda, gold and silver, are literal. They're minerals. They are material things, right? They are things that can be basically summed up as they call the jamadat. The jamadat, inanimate objects and materials and, minerals and everything else that falls under everything that is not what? An'am, which are animals. So far we're covering all the different tiers of life on earth, is that correct? Human beings, one species. Then you have these inanimate objects, whether they are metals or anything like that, and then we're talking about another category then, an'am, animals, which are in between the two. Meaning somewhere in between humans and inanimate objects or plants, we have animal life. They're not quite intelligent to use language, but they do have emotion, unlike rocks and stones and minerals. And then you have in the very end, health. Health is basically what? Your crops, which includes plants. So plants, minerals, animals, humans. Have we covered all life on earth? Yes. So what is Allah saying about all of it? It's all just the temporary goods of this world. It's all illusion. Don't let the ultimate player play you. Don't let these things promise you what they can never give to begin with, because they are temporary. Does it make sense? So in that case, your shahwa is fine. Just don't let it be beguiled. And then, so the thing is, you cannot, when we talked about the ayat of naskh, right? The concept of replacing or abrogating is another way that we usually use explain nasakh, an ayah. Right? So one thing that's also, it's not necessarily part of that subject, but one thing that's also implied there, it's kind of like the saying that you can't replace a myth except with the like of it. So the nature of human beings is if they're acclimated or they like something or they want something, you can't take it away with them unless you give them something in return. Either like it, أو خيرا منها, or better than it. You understand? That's the way human nature works. If I take something from you, then it should be that I replace it either with the same thing or something better. So if you buy something from somewhere that's, for instance, and they have a return policy, either someone, most of the time here, they just give you the same thing. But if someone's even nicer than that, then they'll say, hey, you know what? I'll give you something even better for all your trouble. Correct? So that's why the next ayah, what does Allah say to the Prophet ﷺ? Okay, we've just told you that your desires, if they are related to this world, right, you should be careful. But قُلْ أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ مِنْ ذَلِكُمْ. So but don't get too worried. Let me tell you about something better than all of that. Right? Should I not inform you? قُلْ أُنَبِّئُكُمْ. Should I not inform you or tell you of something which is far greater than that? لِلَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. For those people who are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are gardens with which underneath rivers flow. Therein they will dwell forever, and they will have spouses who are purified. Meaning that, here in this life, obviously, human life has its ups and downs, and part of the downs of human life is we are still challenged with the animal side of life, which means, you get my point, I don't have to spell that out, right? We have to groom ourselves and so forth and so on, because that's part of the challenge. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about certain personal issues dealing with personal hygiene, that this is a test from Allah. Had Allah so willed, we didn't have to live like that. In other words, Jannah is not a place where we have to do personal grooming. There's no filth or anything like that in Jannah. Okay, perfection in human existence, meaning that the physical body, it's hard for us to imagine now because that's the whole point. In this world, physical existence is always coupled with some kind of what? Yeah, nastiness. Let's put it that way. We'll use it as politely as I can and simply, right? Whereas in Jannah, that doesn't exist. So what does it mean? It means that you have the complete and absolute, if you want, experience of life, which is the spiritual and the physical together, but without all of the other negative things that the physical implies. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Azwajun mutahhara, meaning your spouses will be pure. There will be no reason or no issue when it comes to personal hygiene or getting old, even for that, right? And nothing that happens usually in the physical world here will happen there. وَرِضْوَانٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ. And this is mentioned separately, that the pleasure of Allah is as if it's its own, and in another ayah, وَرِضْوَانُ اللَّهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ, meaning that is explanation of this, that the pleasure of Allah is far beyond all of these things. So Jannah is basically there for you, وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ. It's there for you to fulfill your desires. Whereas the pleasure of Allah, okay, is much greater than that. So, not to get into another deep subject, maybe some of you have heard some of the quotes of some shuyukh of the past that say that we worship Allah neither for Jannah nor the fear of Jahannam, but rather for the love of Allah. That's kind of implied here. Okay, Jannah is for your pleasure. Jannah is for your, literally, what does the ayah say? Your shahwa. Ma tashtahi anfusukum is for your nafs, quite literally. Whereas the pleasure of Allah is something much greater than that. So for those who are a little bit more mature, if you will, then they look beyond even that. In fact, some of them even said that I prefer being in this world to be tested and to worship Allah than to be in Jannah. Why? Because Jannah is for me, whereas the test and ubudiyah, being a slave of Allah, is for Him. You understand? So that's, of course, this is a very high level, and that's for people who are very mature. At a certain point, even again, to use that mundane love that we always like to talk about, right? Who is a greater lover? One who always thinks about what they get from their beloved, or one who simply loves without any selfishness whatsoever? Which one is it? Right? The one who gives and doesn't think about what they get in return is the true lover, not the one who says, I give on the stipulation that I get something in return. Interesting to note that in relation to that, there's an incident that's recorded by Al-Alamat al-Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala in his history of the Khulafa, and on the auspices of the virtues of Abu Bakr anhu, he said that there was a time, as you know, there was a kind of a competition, friendly competition between Abu Bakr and Umar anhuma, that at the time, both of them had spent some money fi sabilillah. And the Prophet ﷺ asked Umar, who came first, and said, that, why did you spend this money? What is your intention? He said, well, I intend to please Allah, and I also know that Allah will give me something better in return. Okay? And when Abu Bakr anhu was asked the same question, then Abu Bakr anhu simply said, I intended to please Allah. And in which the Prophet ﷺ said, in your answers, is it the difference between you two? So one does, expecting some reciprocation. I do it, and I'm also expecting something in return. It's not completely selfless, is it? Whereas Abu Bakr anhu said, I do it to please Allah. Only to seek Allah's pleasure, that's it. Whatever Allah does to me, I'm more than happy. I'm more than content. وَلَا سَوْفَ يَرْضَى, meaning whatever it is Allah decides for me, there's no gripes, no quarrels, no nothing. I'm His. Whatever He does, I'm content. Only thing I'm worried about is pleasing Him. Now, is there more selflessness than that? Right, that's the ultimate. So Jannah is for you. Allah's pleasure, that's for those who see beyond that even. But it's okay to want Jannah. We're at that level, right? We just don't want to go to hell. Forget Jannah even, right? Like, it'd be good enough for me if I don't have to go to hell. Forget everything else for a second. And that's fine, because Allah encourages also to seek those things, to seek protection from hell, to seek Jannah. But those who are a little bit more mature, they will seek the pleasure of Allah. Wallahu basirun bil ibad. And Allah is all-seeing in regards to His servants. Basir, of course, is the name of Allah. Al-Basir, that refers to an attribute which is basar. Basar literally is sight, to see. Obviously, I'm hoping that this doesn't need to be explained, but there are some weird people out there in our day and age that will probably have to have this explained. Allah Ta'ala does not see with the use of a limb or an instrument or anything like that. Okay, His sight is an essential attribute of Him, which, like everything else, like Him Himself, is not in need of anything and is not similar to His creation in any way. Okay? So that also means Allah sees without the use of light or any other thing that is contingent upon our sight. If there's no light for us, are we able to see? No. Is that the case with Allah? No. You understand? So what does Allah's sight mean? Allah's sight means it reaches anything that is possible to be seen. Now here's where we get a little bit more interesting, and again, I won't get too deep in these discussions. Right? These are the discussions of some of the, mashallah, mutakallimun and the theologians and other shuyukh. That, what do we mean by being able to be, that something can be seen? In essence, anything that exists has the potential to be seen. Just like anything that exists has the potential to be heard or manifest itself in any other way. Okay? Give you an example. Your thoughts. Can you see them and hear them? Sure you can. Just think, right? Think for a second. When you think about something, can you form a sentence? How can you form a sentence with words and the whole composition of a sentence, subject and object and blah, blah, blah? How can you do that without seeing it or hearing it? So your thought had become a what? A sentence. And sentence and language is only known through symbols and sounds. Am I right or am I wrong? So what's the answer? Can your thoughts be seen and heard, even in your own mind?
Yes.
Yeah. So if it exists, then it has the potential of what? Being seen and being heard. Okay? Does it make sense? Alright, so Allah is basirun bil ibad. If that's the case with us, we are human, we have limitations, but even we can, if you will, we can conceptualize our thoughts to the point that they can be seen and heard in our own mind. So are they hidden from Allah? From His sight? No. Not at all. So He is, in other words, He's well, and the reason why a basir may be used in this context too is because it implies to every single aspect of our existence. Okay, you understand? It applies to every single aspect of our existence. So then, but here, the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains, who are those people then, as He said, لِلَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا. Who are the people who have taqwa? Okay, so this happens often. The quality is mentioned, but then also the description of who qualifies. That comes right after it. So, الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا. The first thing is they are those whom say, Oh Allah, our Rabb, إِنَّنَا آمَنَّا. That's the first thing, is that they have iman. They have accepted Allah Azza wa Jal as He is, and they have accepted the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as His messenger, and whatever it is that they have informed them about, meaning, أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِخَيْرٍ مِّن ذَلِكُمْ. What did the Prophet tell them? Let me tell you of something better. Better than what? Than the mata'ul hayat ad-dunya, than the temporary goods of this world. It is Jannah. Gardens which will be there forever, in which none of the false promises of this world will be there. You will have azwajun mutahhara, purified wives, meaning no filth, no nothing, none of the bad things that you experience in this dunya, but nothing but goodness. And they're not going anywhere. They're not going to deceive you or change. They're not going to, in fact, they're only going to get better. That's the best part of it, right? They're only going to get better. Things that are created, Allah doesn't change, but things that are created, that the idea is that if it's good, it should improve. So the Prophet ﷺ never ever passed a moment in his life except that he would even increase in goodness. That's why when Aisha anha was asked to describe something very peculiar, not peculiar, spectacular, or something noteworthy about the Prophet ﷺ, and she simply said that, how can I do that when every day he would do something that would impress us even more? You understand? It's very hard for me to do that, because every day that we lived with the man, we would see something again that would impress us, just when we thought you've seen it all, right? Just when you thought someone couldn't do anymore. Someone is well accomplished in whatever field, they write a book, they write a poem, and you think that, wow, that's it, they'll never do, and then the next day they write an even better poem, or the next day they write even a better book or a better novel, and you say, wow, who is this guy? You understand? Who is this person that every time we thought that they couldn't do any good better, they outdo themselves again? That's what she's saying. That every day we spent with him, we would see something that would impress us even more than we were the last time. But then she said, so out of all of that, if there's one thing that I could pick, it's the fact that he used to pray all night to the point that his feet would get swollen. And then in the end of all of this, when I begged him to relax a little bit, what did he tell me? أَفَلَا أَكُنْ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a grateful servant of Allah then? If He has chosen me and forgiven me and accepted me, then why should I not do this? Anyhow, okay. Food for thought, of course. Yes, so then the first thing is that they believe, that's iman. The next thing is say, فَغْفِرْ لَنَا ذُنُوبَنَا. They say that, oh Allah, forgive our sins. So that's the second part of taqwa, ajib. What is that? To admit, first of all, that you're a sinner. Okay, to admit, first of all, that you've got issues. And to say, forgive me. Okay. That's when Aisha anha again was asked that, when do you become pious? She said, when you know that you're a sinner. When do you become pious? When you become conscious of Allah, when you realize that you're a sinner. That's the beginning. When you realize you have faults in dhunub and you ask forgiveness for them, this is the beginning of your piety. A person, who never believes that they do wrong, That is not a person who's conscious of Allah. And that happens in the very beginning of the saga of humanity, in the very beginning of the Quran. The entire story of Adam alayhi salam and Iblis. Iblis thought he had no problems. What happened to him? Whereas Adam, the first human alayhi salam, what did he say? رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. The admission of their weakness, admission of their problems, and complete reliance only on the mercy of Allah. That is the beginning of taqwa and consciousness of Allah. Not to assume that أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّن. I'm everything. There's no reason for me to do anything because I know everything. I'm right. I'm always right. I did everything right. I never made any mistakes. So,
So Allah knew what was in his heart.
And yeah, that was the reason why he tested him that way.
So did Allah actually do this to reveal the truth?
Yes, and that is the nature of every test. As we will see in the Quran repeats, every imtihan, every ibtila, especially with the munafiqeen, that comes later too. Every time a test comes for ourselves and also for and see, okay, I'm going to just mention this briefly. This is because you have to be careful how you use this information. When tests come to the ummah too as a group, you will see the munafiqun in their behavior. Absolutely. When the test comes, we will see who's who in their actions and everything that they do. However, as Muslims, we have to have a lot of karam, and we're very honorable people. We still can't do what? We still can't call them out and say, okay, you're no longer with us. We see by your actions and your words that you're not sincere, so go. We can't do that. We have to treat them on the outward, that they say, La ilaha illallah. Okay, they're Muslims. Let's treat them like Muslims. But it is a warning sign. That's why Allah sends tests, to show either yourself. Sometimes Allah tests us also in a way that it's something that we were not aware of. He sends a test and we say, oh, okay, there's a problem here with me I got to work on. Sometimes He does it as a group. In this case, Iblis was, basically, he was the man of the universe, so to speak. He was the leader of the malaika even. All right? So basically everyone looked at him as the shining example, whereas Allah knew that in their hearts, or his heart rather, there was something wrong, which is this kibr and pride. And so He revealed it. So that's what Allah does every once in a while, even to us, and as a group too. That's what I mean. In front of other people, people will be revealed. Their words and their actions, it will be very clear to us when those tests come. That, oh, that's what this guy or this girl, or whoever it is, that's what they're about. Right? And now the time of test come, we see what they really are. Right? But we can't do what? That's why I'm saying you have to use that information carefully. We can't, after that, call them out in front of everyone and say, I knew you were a hypocrite. Right? And so, you just leave us alone. But it also means that if you do see that kind of behavior in someone when a test comes, that you should be very wary of them. Be aware of them. Watch them. Don't trust them as you did before. Because now you see through their actions that there's something other than what they used to say. So you say, right, I don't know about, I'm not going to call you out. I'm not going to point fingers and embarrass you. But I'm also not going to trust you, let alone put you in leadership positions. That's what happens to us as an ummah today. People, all the ones that show clear nifaq, they say, oh yeah, you become the leader, you lead us to where? How could you trust a person like that who is clearly shown, you understand, clearly shown their true colors at the time of test? And I don't need to mention any names. You can, think about that for yourselves if you want to ponder who am I talking about, who am I not talking about. But I think this happens even more than one individual. We see this all across the board in Muslim societies and in the Muslim world, unfortunately, that when tests come, we see that many of the people that we would look up to as leaders, so-called, quote-unquote, show their true colors. And then we should be aware then at that point in time that what they really are. Right? That doesn't mean we will excommunicate them. It just means that we have to be careful. Right? Be wary of what they say and what they do. Don't take them necessarily for their word. May Allah help us and protect us. But yes, Allah does that to not just Iblis, He does that to everybody. Right? And basically that's only there to show. Why would Allah do that unless He wanted to show us something? He wanted to show us a reality that was perhaps up until that time obscure to us. So may Allah protect us. And that's why smart people do what? They admit already that they have faults. And they ask for forgiveness. And they also ask for Allah to cover those faults. So also the Prophet ﷺ, Ajib, everything is so profound. In the times of trials and tribulations, the Prophet ﷺ also taught us to make dua as such. Allahumma astur awratina wa amin rawatina. The first dua he made is that, oh Allah, cover our faults. Cover our weaknesses. When those trials come, so it means, two, we should be aware. See, we could take it one way. We could be also self-righteous and say, oh, such and such hypocrisy was revealed. Or we can also be scared for ourselves and say, you see, it's the attitude. Iblis thought he was perfect. Adam alayhi salam admitted his mistake. Daranna anfusana. Okay? That's what it's all about. فَاغْفِرْ لَنَا ذُنُوبَنَا. So when we see these things happen, instead of being self-righteous and saying, oh, look at these hypocrites, we should also worry about whom? Yes. Ourselves. Cover our faults. Ustur awratina. We have our own problems. We don't want them revealed. Please cover those weaknesses and faults from others. وَآمِنْ رَوْعَاتِنَا. And abate our fears and our worries. Amin, literally from, amin. Okay, amin ra'atina, meaning those things which cause us perturbation and fear, abate all of that, take it away from us and keep us calm, right? Because that's what happens when trials come too. Everyone gets a little bit worried about who's next. Or who is next in line? What's going to happen to us? And we don't want our faults revealed, and we don't want us to be in that kind of tribulation. So that's what the Prophet taught us. Again, beautiful because it's humility. It's not, oh, look at them, I'm all right. No, it's protect us from that as well. Don't allow us to get to that stage where we are also humiliated or we are also tried to the point that our own faults are brought out. Rather, forgive us. Right? And then, وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, and save us from the hellfire, meaning they acknowledge the existence of the hereafter. And the proof of that, it goes further. As-sabirina, the first thing. What is the proof of it? Sabr, patience. Was-sadiqeen, truthfulness, meaning that they are people who submit to the truth wherever it is found. Of course, the truth here being first and foremost belief in Allah, amanna, right? Accepting Allah's existence and His oneness and wahdaniyah. Then thereafterwards, wal-qaniteen. Qaniteen here, as some say, means those who are completely dedicated to Allah and His service by calling people towards Allah and obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is your actions regarding yourself, if you will, your personal self. Whereas wal-munfiqeen, to spend in the path of Allah, refers to actions that are in regards to property.
I'm sorry, I thought kanti mean contented. They are whatever they have, they content on.
That's qana'a. It's a different word.
So we'll do qaf with two.
And then wal-mustaghfirina bil-ashar, that they ask forgiveness from Allah during the early morning hours, meaning tahajjud here in this case. That's what that means. Okay, before fajr. Okay, because that is mentioned specifically because of its. The Prophet ﷺ describing it as the hour in which du'as are accepted by Allah Azza wa Jal. Even one hadith describes it as yanzilu rabb, your Lord Allah Azza wa Jal descends. Now, of course, again, having no relation to any physical movement as we know it, but rather something very peculiar and specific to Allah. Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illa hu. So the next ayah then says, then Allah Himself witnesses that indeed He is the only one worthy of worship. وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ, as well as the angels, وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ, as well as those who have been given knowledge. قَائِمًا بِالْقِسْطِ. Now, okay, I don't know how it's translated in this gracious Quran. So if you just tell me, then I can explain.
Which one?
This is ayah number 18.
18. God Himself bears witness that indeed there is no God but Him, as do the angels and those with knowledge. that he is the one upholding justice. There is no God but him, the overpowering, the all-wise.
That's why I like this translation. Okay, some translations, even some, no names given here, but some modern exegetes or mufassirun have explained qa'iman bil qist. All right, those who uphold justice to be a description of ulul ilm. But that's not true. He translated it correctly. Qa'iman bil qist is, I would have to go through the whole Arabic grammar thing, but then I have to give you an Arabic grammar lesson. It is the hal of shahid Allah, meaning Allah bears witness while doing what? As how do you translate it here?
Upholding justice.
While upholding justice. Now let me explain what that means. Hal dhul hal is something in Arabic grammar, like when somebody does something. I'll give you a simple example. You say, Ja'a Zaydun raqiban. Zayd came to us while riding on a horse or whatever. Raqiban, meaning that in the state, he came in the state of what? Riding on a horse, or riding in a Porsche, or riding in a whatever, right? Raqiban, meaning when he was doing his action, this is what his condition was. This is the state in which the action was being done. So in other words, Allah is bearing witness while being qa'iman bil qist. Okay, this is the actual what the ulama have said about the hal, meaning Allah is the right translation, is the one he rendered. That is Allah who bears witness that he is the only one worthy of worship while doing what? Upholding complete justice. But what does complete justice here mean? We're not talking about going to a court, okay, and then, the judge decides your verdict. Complete justice here means that knowing exactly what is what. You see? Knowing exactly what is what. So therefore, who knows more than Allah? Nobody. So Allah bears witness that what? While knowing everything and knowing exactly what is what, Allah bears witness that only He is worthy of worship. Okay? Does it make sense? That's actually the right translation. The malaika and ulul ilm are mentioned separately. Not as meaning that's a separate addition to that. The malaika also know. In other words, they also bear witness, which is another interesting point. Because if you say ashhadu, which is what we say, right? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, is that the same as iman, where you say I accept? It's two different things. Shahada and tasdeeq are two different things. Tasdeeq is when someone tells me something and I accept it. Okay? Shahada is when
You see it.
you see it for yourself. You don't have to be told. You yourself have borne witness. I saw it. If I say, bring me your shuhada, what does that mean? Bring me your eyewitnesses. Bring me those amongst you who have actually seen this, not heard it, or somebody else told them and they accepted their testimony. Okay? So you bring the police officer who testifies against you that yes, you were speeding. And he doesn't have any other witnesses, but the judge accepts their testimony. But if you have eyewitnesses, what are they asking for? Not secondhand information, correct? Tasdeeq and iman is usually related to secondhand information. Someone tells you about something and you do what? You accept it. Shahada is different. Shahada means eyewitness. So that's a different level, isn't it? It's not just a matter when you say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, it's I bear witness, I see it. As if it's with your own two eyes, as the Prophet ﷺ said, what is ihsan? And ta'budullah ka'annaka tarah. Worship Allah as if you see it. If it's not just a matter of someone told you and you accepted it, but it's a matter now of what? I see it. It's before my very eyes. I don't have to question it. I don't have to think about it. I see it right in front of me.
So does it go back to when the souls were asked to take a...
No.
No?
Like I said, that is more of like a subconscious. I think we explained this before, right? Did we explain that before? I think we did go over that. It's more of a subconscious, if you will, kind of like inkling that you have. Somewhere in your subconscious, And then we explained, like some people have retorted that, well, how would you be held responsible? Because the ayah says that this will be held against you on the day of judgment. When you say, Bala, like, no doubt, you are a Rabb. How would that be a hujjah if you weren't conscious of it? Well, then the answer was, Ahsahallahu wa nasu. There's another ayah which Allah says that Allah took account of everything you did and they forgot. But Allah will still held them, meaning they will be, things will be brought in front of them the day of Qiyamah that you forgot all about. And then Allah will still do what? Well, it happened. Here you are. In the act, you may have forgotten it, we didn't. Here it is. So you'll still be? Right. And I made a pretty bad joke, and forgive me if that offended you, but you know how sometimes our lady folks do that to us? At times, right? And I said, I didn't do that. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. I didn't know. When did that happen? No, you did. It was this day, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so what, are you serious? And I'm being sincere. I have no idea. It's like, I did that? No, come on. No, I didn't do that. And say, no, you did. It's like, oh, mashallah, okay, maybe, I don't know. Astaghfirullah. You right? Same thing happens. So Allah does, it's more of a subconscious thing. And that's important to remember because that brings up, I don't want to get off the topic, but that brings up the whole idea of Iman itself. Is it intuitive or is it something that is nadari? So basically all knowledge is either of two types. It's either daruri or nadari. Daruri are intuitive things that you know and they don't have to be explained to you. Why? They're intuitive. Like I exist. If I wanted to get really philosophical and ask you how do you know you exist? How would you prove it? Like if I wanted an explanation, I want a full detailed explanation from whatever means you possibly can think of that prove to me you exist. It's fruitless. You know you exist, it's intuitive. I'm here, I exist. You understand what I'm saying? Do you understand? You don't provide a whole list of details of why you exist, but you exist. There are other things that you have to prove because you use another, meaning it's not intuitive, but it's speculative. What do they mean by that? Get through all these technical terminology. You have to actually think about it. There's a process of thought. There has to be an explanation. Now, is Iman intuitive or nadari? That's a discussion that the shuyukh have had thousands of years ago. Is it something that you just intuit that God exists, or is it something that you actually think about? Believe it or not, most say that it's something you actually think about. It's not something you intuit.
But isn't it something that you really need?
Of course.
As part of it, so you do need to believe in something.
You do. But the question is, what do you believe in? And that's why shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illahu. So the more you think, the more you should come to the conclusion that the only one worthy of worship is Allah. And that's why even the word Allah has to be explained. Allah is that being who has all qualities of perfection, who exists by himself and needs nothing else to exist, so forth and so on. Okay? You see what I'm saying? If you are going to worship and take something as a deity, then it should only be that being that has this or these qualifications. It should not be a human. It should not be an angel. It should not be a jinn. It should not be any physical object that exists. This is the whole of the Qur'an's message, correct? And Ibrahim alayhi salam, كَذَلِكَ نُرِي إِبْرَهِيمَ مَلَكُوتِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. This is coming in Surah Al-An'am when he looked at the sun and then the moon and everything. What was he doing? He's looking at all these huge physical objects in the universe that look like they're providing us life and so many other things, but then he realized something about them. It was just what? It sets, meaning it changes. So if it changes, what is that indicative of? Right. It's temporary. And also that something else is influencing it. So this cannot be my I don't like things like that. I can't worship something like that. You see what I'm saying? Now, was that intuitive or was that nadari? He thought about it and he came to one conclusion. Inni wajjahtu. I turn my whole existence to Allah, the only being who deserves to be worshipped. Does it make sense? Or am I getting too...
Yeah, it does. But what do you tell people, like if they say that everything's explained by science, which it's not.
Right.
You can't explain everything by science.
Okay, so you're right. That's a good question. And that requires another class. But the simple answer is this. basically, science can only answer things that are relegated to the very mundane and material world. Okay? And at a certain point, you have to go beyond that and ask the question about the nature of the material world. This is a long discussion. The nature of the material world, in essence, is the same. It changes. What is change indicative of?
Temporary.
Right? Cannot be permanent. So either you're saying that the universe always existed and was permanent, or it has a beginning. And if it has a beginning, then therefore it must have what? An end. And also, if it has a beginning, something must have started it. That's the essence. Now, we can take that argument and go even deeper, but that's the essence of it. If you're saying, like I went online and I saw some of these ulama that again discussed these things, and then one of these atheists retorted by saying, well, just because this universe doesn't have a beginning doesn't mean that there was another universe before, trying to prove that the universe was always there, the material world was always there and never had a beginning, right? That there was another universe before it, like it, look at the key words, that was there before this one that we're in. What was the key word there? Like it. If it's a universe like it, then it has the same qualifications, which is, has a beginning, it changes. So you're talking about what's called dawr of tasalsul, which is an infinite regress. It's illogical. But that's a bigger issue, and that's why I always mention it. There's a difference between, I mentioned it last time, between logic and reason and what they call hukm al-adi, which is empirical evidence. Do you understand? Logic and reason goes beyond what is empirical. That's why I asked whoever was an engineer, do you have concepts that work but don't exist in the real world? What's the answer? Yes. So reason goes beyond the material, okay? And when we think about it reasonably, that infinite regress doesn't make any sense. You can't have another universe like it because, again, it implies time, space, place, all of these things, beginning, change. So at some point in time, the only thing that makes sense is there has to be a being who has no beginning, no end, and does not change. And therein is the answer to what do we mean when we say Allah. You see what I'm saying? That is what we mean when we say Allah. No beginning, no end. This is like the very basic aqidah that we're taught, hopefully. That this is another issue like this, right? Da'imun bila ibtida. As you know, Aqidat al-Tahawiyya is a very famous text of aqidah, you know. It has no beginning, no end. These are all the basic descriptions of Allah Azza wa Jal that you must understand and know about Allah Azza wa Jal. Then it makes sense. Okay? So an atheist, the problem with them is they relegate everything to the material, to the mundane. And so they don't think beyond that.
Right.
And so if they don't see it, they're just simply not going to what? They're not going to accept it. So it's almost like at a certain point in time, depends on what kind of, you have different kinds of, you know, atheists. And some people are just fed up with the Christian church, but that's good. You can talk to them. They're very open-minded. They might accept what you're saying.
It's the same thing that at one point nobody thought that humans could fly, right?
No.
But, I mean, like, you could imagine that you could have a machine that could, and...
Oh, you mean like, yes,
So,
okay.
so then at that point, if you can't look beyond, then you are just stuck in that reality where you think
Right.
that, oh, we could never fly.
Right.
But you don't know, even scientifically, that maybe it can be proven down the road, maybe thousands of years later. Like, so if you do believe even in that scientific logic that everything has to be explained, how can you then deny that maybe you're not seeing something that may come later that you're just not able to see right now? I don't know.
There's an issue, that's why I bring these things up often. There is an issue with the development of the Western world, Western thought, and modern education, because scientists and people who tend to be atheists are mainly biologists, scientists in that field. Interestingly enough, mathematicians normally, by statistics, believe more in a creator or a God, because there's a difference in the two fields. One is pure reason, okay? Mathematicians, basically, that's where pure logic and reason are related to math, okay? Whereas biology and everything else related is purely what? Empirical. So whatever I see in this laboratory, that's real. Everything, and they're taught to think like that. It's a mechanism in their brains, okay? So they don't go beyond that. The reason why I say that's a problem with modern education is because there's no, like, everyone specializes in a field, and that's it. But the problem is also we told them we're an expert in everything after that, right? Like, once you specialize in this field, you know everything. And it's like, no, stay in your lane. You may be a biologist, but you don't know anything about cosmology and all of these, these other things. You don't know anything about pure reason, okay? Anyhow, it's a very important point because they divorced themselves over years, even philosophically. Old Western philosophy used to believe in things like pure reason and right and wrong. Modern Western philosophy has become what they could literally call them, if you look at the history and development, empiricists. David Hume and all these people. What are they? What does empiricist mean? Empirical. Meaning now, reason cannot think about things like God. This is what they claim. Or morality. That's all the unknown. The only thing we can know is what's empirical. So you see, even their philosophy took that turn, where it all became pure materialism. Pure materialism. Okay, so anything that they can't see, feel, and touch, they're basically just going to say, well, that's all just conjecture. Where we're going to say, no, there are absolutes. Okay, so a square is a square, no matter where you are. Is that correct? Because by definition, this is an abstract theory, it must have these four sides. Anyhow, we can go. But that is an important topic, inshallah, we can do another time, because I'm going to veer off from tafsir if we do that. But that is a very important topic, and that's basically how we have to understand the audience and why they think the way they think. And even whether that argument works, because if they are pure atheists in that sense, that they only believe in what's tangible, probably a waste of time. But if they're an atheist because they just have a bad taste in their mouth from their own religious experience, Christianity in this case, right? Or they're agnostic, whatever. It might not be a bad idea to learn the process of which I'm telling of how to explain these things to them and to talk to them, because they're actually maybe a little bit more open-minded and they may understand, like, you know what, that makes sense. At least that happened to me before I became Muslim, right? I said, you know what?
But even as logical as the biologists and scientists want to be, by definition, they're illogical in that still, to this day, life, they still have such a difficult time explaining where did life begin, where did not, and that's the most fundamental thing of their thing, and they can't even explain it. Their whole basis is illogical at the very beginning.
Right, because you can't base it on something that is purely empirical material. And I'll even say this. This is why I love teaching that subject. Like, look, there's a Abu Abdullah As-Sanusi rahimahullah ta'ala. I know that Sheikh Abdulaziz Suraqa and Monroeville translated one of his books into English. He's a thinker of what? It was a 16th century Islam, okay, of North Africa. He wrote a lot of books about this subject, theology, aqidah. But the genius of these ulama is they were able to kind of, just like how the Prophet ﷺ was given, as he said, Ortaytu Jawami al-Kalim, which means I was given very concise speech. What does that mean? That very deep things and concepts explained in very simple ways and very simple and very compact. Okay, so you understand my point? A lot of the ulama were like that too. They were able to explain all of these complex issues in a very compact way if you understand what they're implying. Now the ingenious thing about his books, he starts out with what's called the hukam. The hukam is basically, follow me if you can, if you get confused, tell me. The hukam is simply like, may Allah make it easy for me too to explain these things. Make dua, Allahumma ameen. The hukam, you normally use hukam as a judgment, right? The hakim is the judge. The hukam literally means to take two things and to make a nisbah between them. Okay? You can do it with anything. This masjid is beautiful. I have two different subjects. Masjid, beautiful. Now, if I bring those two things together, the hukam is either that is true or it is false. Okay? Now the hukam, meaning how do we arrive at a hukam, that the nisbah between these two things is right or wrong. Either we do it, as he says, three ways. Aqli, Shara'i, Adi. Aqli is obviously what? Right, with the mind. We make a process here where we think about something, or we have a process, and we come to a decision using the intellect. That's one. Okay? The other is shar'i. Salah is fard. That's a hukm, is it not? We're taking two things, salah and obligation. Now we put the two together and we said that salah is an obligation. But how do we come to that conclusion? Was it intellectual? No. We came to this conclusion because Allah says, Aqimus salah. Right? This is shar'i, meaning the source of that hukm is from the sharia. The third category, he said, is adi. Adi means ada. What happens continuously. So he said what? Bitakrar, meaning we observe things in the physical world that after observation, we see things that happen over and over and over and over again, and we come to a conclusion, like fire burns. How did you come up to that conclusion? Well, because every time I put something in the fire, it burns. But he made one ingenious stipulation here, that he said, بِصِحَةِ تَخَلِّفْ, or تَخَلُّفْ, excuse me. بِصِحَةِ تَخَلِّفْ means that your observations can change. They can be wrong. Why is that an ingenious observation? I'm going to see if anyone's using their brain and letting their brain flow here. بِصِحَةِ, right? تَخَلُّفْ. Not تَخَلُّفْ, تَخَلُّفْ from khalf. Meaning that it can be at times changed, this observation of yours.
Different times, I guess.
There you go. Different times, different places, different situations, because you're basing it on the empirical world. What is the very essence of what we just defined, the whole physical universe, as something that changes. Therefore, your observation can also change. So the very essence of science is what? How could you make any judgment about abstract or rational ideas on a science, on a subject that is based on things that continually change? What's true of today will be what? Right, it may not be true tomorrow. So can you arrive at any truth, really? Do you see my objection here? Can you arrive at any truth, really? You understand?
I'll call you back.
You say, yeah, for now, this is what we observe. But you never know. Could be tomorrow that our observations tell us something completely different. Whereas rationally, there are some things that we know are always going to be true. Like, as an example, like two contradictory things cannot be true at one at the same time.
I have one simple question. At the time of Rasulullah, the Sahaba was sitting around him and he talked about something, and none of them questioned him anything what we are questioning to you and want to understand these things. They were not dumb, they were very knowledgeable. Hazrat Ali, they were not very knowledgeable people. How could they accept right away what he said, and that was everything was clear to them? While we argue, we do this, we do this, and we still don't reach any conclusion. We just couldn't understand.
Okay, that's a good question. And the answer to that is actually that the Sahaba will not ask questions in regards to ahkam. Because of adab, because this is what the Quran says, La tas'alu an ashya, right? Don't ask about certain things when the Quran is being revealed, unless it's revealed to you and it causes you some difficulty. If Allah doesn't say anything, if the Prophet ﷺ doesn't say anything, leave it alone. It's easier for you. So those had to do with things like, for instance, Bani Israel was condemned for that because they asked so many questions that everything became haram. Right? That this food, this particular, like if you go to a kosher market now, it's like this particular part of the animal we can't eat. We can't eat milk and meat at the same time, even in personal relations, which we're not going to talk about now, of marital affairs. The same thing happened. The Sahaba didn't ask questions because as long as we don't ask questions, it's all good. If we ask questions, it'll all make this haram, that haram, you can't do this, you can't do it, and then all of a sudden life will become just what? If you look at really truly practicing, because that's the example Allah uses for Bani Israel, for us, that if you look at really practicing Orthodox Jews, if you talk about their personal life and ahkam, food, marital relations, everything, it's very strict. Everything is like, you can't have any fun at all in the dunya. You're just, that is why, because they kept on asking me. So it has to do, as far as questions about these things, right? Existence. I'll give you an example. Existence, creation. Sorry. There's a few narrations that are actually in Sahih al-Bukhari where the certain tribe of Yemen, the Ash'ari tribe, which is Ajib because one of the great theologians of Islamic history, Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari, actually comes from that tribe. They came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the first question they asked him was, what was the beginning of all of this? Meaning, what was the beginning of life, the universe? And the Prophet ﷺ was very happy. He was actually happy that they asked this question. And he responded by saying, Kan Allah, wa la shay'a ma'ahu. There was Allah and there was nothing with him. You see that? So the idea is they asked that kind of question. You see, and he was happy with that question and he answered. So they did ask those kind of questions. They didn't ask questions in regard to law, because that was the adab that was taught to them by Allah. Basically, if I don't say it, if the Prophet doesn't say it to you directly, then take it as a rahmah from me. I'm allowing you to do these things. Keep it that way, because if you keep on asking questions like the people came before you, I will make life difficult for you. Everything will become haram, and you will have this problem, that problem. Another thing too is because of again this adab that the companions had, sometimes they just didn't feel like they wanted to bother the Prophet with their own problems. So they would wait for other people to come and ask questions. But they did ask, and also the other part of it is that not all the Sahaba were the same. Like you mentioned Ali radiallahu anhu. Even again in another hadith of Bukhari, the reason I mention that is because everyone pretty much so accepts Sahih al-Bukhari, right? So if you say that it's a hadith of Bukhari, people really can't argue with you for the most part. But Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said that حفظت من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I have memorized from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 2 large vessels. Meaning I have, literally what he means is that I have 2 different types of knowledge that I had memorized from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَأَمَّا أَحَدُهُمَا, as far as one of them is concerned, فَبَثَثْتُهُ. One of them I had already given it, meaning I delivered that knowledge to all of you. Okay, I told you about that. The other one, if I told you about this, then this neck of mine would be cut. Meaning these are, what is that knowledge that he knew about from the Prophet ﷺ, but he cannot tell people because otherwise they will cut his neck. Right? That's the question. Right? What is the knowledge that, as Ali anhu, again in the Muqaddimah of Sahih Muslim, these are the very strong, what are considered the stronger compilations of hadith, right? In the beginning of Sahih Muslim, Ali anhu actually says that you speak to people according to their level of intellect, because you don't want them to tell them something which they would deny Allah and His Prophet. Right? So the idea is the same for us, that the Sahaba did actually delve into these things, but also even amongst the Sahaba, as we just mentioned, these were people whom were not average. Not all the Sahaba had the same level of intellect or even time with the Prophet. Is that true or not? They were all good in the sense that they all obeyed the Prophet and they were true to their to their devotion to the Prophet, but not all of them were in the same in terms of knowledge and intellect and things of that nature. Is that true or not?
Yes.
Right. So some of them amongst them did ask those questions, did learn those things, and did understand these things, but they were not everybody. So it's safe to say that basically, sum it all up, they did ask about those things. There are incidents very clear incidents like in Sahih Bukhari that I mentioned, where they came and they asked this question: how was the beginning of the universe? How did this all happen? They asked that question, right? So, but not all of them. And the ones who did, they were only few, right? And that also shows us, that sum it all up, that as far as we're concerned, these discussions too should be relegated to only certain people.
And then isn't it also that these days people just do it sometimes for the sake of debate and to find faults and weaknesses and loopholes.
Of
And
course.
and I think people at that time were told not to do that.
Of course.
Just because
That's called jidal.
Right.
Right. To argue about the deen is absolutely not correct. Right.
Because Musa, like you said,
Right.
his people did the same.
Right. And that's coming. If you look in the other ayah, well, let's put it this way too. So the idea is that this knowledge was taught in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It was discussed. but not by everybody. And it's not for everybody. However, when it becomes necessary is when the subject is brought up and confusion arises out of that subject. Okay, you understand my point? That's why Imam Ghazali rahimahullah said it's like medicine. Medicine is given proportionate to the disease and the dosage, the person, as anyone here who's a medical doctor can tell you, right? You don't give the same medicine unless you just went the cheap way out. I mean, what do you call it? My wife's sister's husband. Is there a name for that? In Urdu, there must be a name, right? So he's a doctor, right? And I don't understand why people do it. Like every sickness that the family gets, they just give them antibiotics and stuff for the easy way out, just knock it all out. I'm like, this is the worst. Me personally, I wait at least 3 or 4 days. If the symptoms don't calm down, then I might talk to a doctor. But if your body will deal with it in a couple of days, you keep on giving people, and he knows that. Why does he give me antibiotics? Just the easy way out of it. Take it from the office. Here's your antibiotics. You'll be okay. And I go, wow. So you know what I mean? But really, you should know what to give to whom and how much, right? So that's what this knowledge is like. Okay, you give it to people according to how much they need. The reason why I like talking about it now is because, frankly, the majority of the Muslim population in North America are usually educated. Unlike, for instance, in Europe, the majority of the Muslim population in England and France and Germany are actually not educated. So they have different set of problems. Like a lot of believe it or not, this is really bad, a lot of the biggest criminals and gangsters and drug dealers in Europe are all Muslims. Because it's a different group. So I mean, here in North America, mashallah, they tend to be very highly educated too, not just educated. So there's a different crowd. They're going to go to universities and they're going to talk to people that will bring up all these objections. Okay, and since they understand the subject, so it's up to us now to bring that subject up, to talk about it, and to deliver, right? To give them what they need, just like a doctor would. This is what you need. I wouldn't do this to like a villager somewhere in Bangladesh, because that just confused them. Not that there can't be a very intelligent villager in Bangladesh, but for the most part, it's not a matter of like intelligence. You're put in a certain situation. You don't have time to think about these things. I have a rickshaw that I gotta feed my family, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about these things because, so I'm not going to bother them with that because it's not the proper dosage, the proper right medicine for that person. They don't need that, but other people may need something else. Does that make sense? True. So it's the crowd too that you're talking to. That's why when Sahaba were challenged with these things, you'll see many incidents that Ali radiallahu anhu, Hidayatul Awliya, it's a very famous book that some Jews, some rabbis came to his house to ask him these same questions. And he obliged. He answered in a very long, detailed, deep way about all these things. Existence, the creator, his attributes, right? Why? He had that knowledge and it was the crowd. It was the people he was talking to. This is the right medicine for them. We can deliver, right? Whereas, other people like that, there's a famous poem of a Bedouin who was asked, why do you believe in Allah? And he said, do not like the dung of when you see the dung of a camel, does it not show you that there was a camel there? If you see the footsteps of a person, does it not show you that there is a person that walked by? So why is it that I see the sky and the earth and the oceans and I don't know that there is right, you see? The medicine according to the person. You see, he's still using fiqh, is he not? He still thought about it. But he didn't have to get into these detailed explanations of cosmology and change and the nature. He didn't have to do that. He just looked, it's simple. There it is. Subhanallah. So, but here's the other thing that I would mention the next ayah, and we'll leave it at this. Then if you want more questions, we can have more questions. In the Dina Indallah Islam. So basically, if Allah bears witness of His oneness, knowing exactly, again, the hukam, what is what. So uluhiyya, divinity can only be attributed. Remember he said it's the nisbah between two things. Uluhiyya and divinity can only be attributed to Allah. So therefore, deen is only one deen with Allah, which is Islam. Okay? And then he said that those people, وَمَا اخْتَلَفَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابِ, those people before you were given the book, which is obviously a reference to the two
Jews and Christians.
Right. They did not differ except إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمْ الْعِلْمُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُم, meaning after they had received knowledge from Allah. The reason why they had differences is because of baghyan, which means here jealousy. Jealousy, for which reason? The love of name, fame, and wealth. Because let's face it, when you want to exploit people, some people think this religion thing really works. Remember we talked about the evangelical Christians and the, poor people? It works. The preacher can literally come into church and say, God told me last night that he wants me to have my own private jet. And they actually brought it for him. He says, well, this works. It works. I can really get people to do whatever I want. Money, fame, name. So what is Allah saying? That they knew what's right and wrong. Their differences were only because of what? This jealousy, and jealousy because of what? Name, fame, wealth, so forth and so on. So it's indicative of something. It's also kind of an answer to your question. One of my teachers told me this very early on, because our deen is based on ittiba', that's coming up, fattabi'uni, following the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? What he taught us is from Allah. We accept that, we follow it. Where do the differences come up? Really? Baghyan, out of jealousy, competition, love of name, fame, and wealth, and so forth and so on. And that's why one of my teachers said this very interesting. Any deviant view of our deen or our religion, meaning not following the Prophet ﷺ, but making something up along the way, usually there's something political behind it. Baghyan bainahum. Something there. Someone gets this idea, man, this religion thing works. So I can claim to be Muslim, but then I'll make up this thing, that thing, to kind of like get my own little following. And if the following's big enough, and and I have a little tax that I give them too, making a reference here, you get, right? And then make a little money off of it, then wow, this really works. I can keep this thing going. Why did they do that? What was the real motive? Was it the search for truth? Was it a sincere difference of opinion? Or was it, as Allah said, even about the people that came before us? Did they differ because there was sincerity there? No. They differed because there was this unfortunate, right? People can use religion too for dunya. It does happen. Okay? So that is the worst case scenario, because we're supposed to be people who are sincere. Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illahu, and we also wa ulul ilm, people. If we have knowledge, then we should be sincere, and we should also keep our sincerity for the sake of Allah when we say and do anything in our religion. Okay? But other people, do they sometimes, knowing what's right and wrong, do they say, yeah, that's great, but this is not going to quite work because of political expediency, or I want a big following. I know this is another, because this is the big topic of the day too. Like I just saw the other day in Central Avenue in Pittsburgh, a big church with all the rainbow flags all around it. Say, okay, that's wonderful. Why are we on this bandwagon? Of all the other issues in the world that are going on, starvation, death, poverty, war, you don't see as big of a deal of it as this. This is the biggest issue that we can talk about now, is that, right? Like that's not coincidence. And on top of that, it's not like the Bible doesn't talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. It's very clear. It's still there in the Bible. They haven't removed it yet from it. I know any text that I know of the Bible, it's all there. But why do they deny it? In other words, textually, it's there. This is a sin. There were people, literally according to your own tradition, that were destroyed because of this sin. But you just conveniently overlook it and say, hey, we're going to fly the flag. Why? Why? It's political expediency. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to look like the bad guy. We're going to go with the flow, because if we look like the bad guy now, then who's going to fill up the church and who's going to pay? Who's going to put money in the donation box and say, hey, who's going to, you understand? And it's better to just go along with the flow, even if we know something else is just different, and it's always the easy way out. The challenge now, the test for the Muslims is what? Ibrahim alayhi salam was one lonely man in the world. And they told him, if you don't be quiet, we're going to do what? حَرِّقُوهُ, throw him in the fire. What did Ibrahim alayhi salam say? Okay, go right ahead. And then what happened to the fire? Kuni bardan wa salama. They say this is the big test for the Muslims today. Right? They're threatening us. We're going to throw you in the fire. What's wrong with you guys? Why don't you just shape up? Go along with everything else that's going on. You know, you guys still... It's ajib because I'll leave it at this and we'll open for questions. When I mentioned the ayah, I think I mentioned that إِنَّهُمْ أُنَاسٌ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ. The people of Lut alayhi salam in this ayah at least acknowledged that Lut alayhi salam and his followers were doing the right thing. يَتَطَهَّرُونَ meaning purity, people of purity. So it's what the ulama say, they were acknowledging their own sin. That what we do is what we do. We're not saying it's good. You guys are like, you're so righteous, mashallah. You're so perfect. You don't want to do this. You don't want to join our hedonist party here and party with us and do what we do. But they acknowledged they were what? They said that they were good people. They were righteous people. إِنَّهُمْ أُنَاسٌ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ. They are people who are trying to follow the right thing and do the right thing and be pure, be chaste, be good. You see? You see my point? They at least acknowledge. Now it's the opposite. If you object to them, you're evil, right? You're like. I've heard that they equate people like that to Nazis. I'm not joking. This is what someone said, and I know this one student in Darul Qasim in Chicago came to me while he was going to college. This is what happened. That the opposing side, one of their arguments was that people who stand against this issue are just like the Nazis. So again, if you know logic, that's a completely unreasonable conclusion. Like, really? I'm a Nazi now? Okay, whatever. Right? But you see, it's all emotional. Hey, they're Nazis. But what is the point? They're trying to equate people who oppose that lifestyle to what? To being evil, to being wrong, to being, now you're the bad guy. If you say, no, we don't believe in this, we don't approve of this lifestyle, now you're going to be the one who's immoral, quite literally. Where at least the people of Lut alayhi salam acknowledged that they were immoral. At least they acknowledged it. Like, yeah, we know what we're doing is wrong. And we know that you're trying to do the right thing, but don't you want to have fun with us? See, that was their argument. Don't you want to do what we do and just enjoy life a little bit? Right? Instead of, no, you guys are wrong. You guys are, intolerant. All these key words, right? Then, like I said, this one lady, so calling them Nazis, right? If you're on the opposite side, you're a Nazi, mashallah. So this is our challenge. But no worry. In this Surah Ali Imran, again, we'll see that these are the tests that Allah sends. That's why we didn't go through that ayah, but the ayah before the ayah that we just mentioned, Zuyyina lin-nas, was actually about the Battle of Badr. If the test comes, you will be put in one position that you didn't even want to be in. You see, that's the beauty of Badr. We'll get into that later. The beauty of Badr is this was a situation the Sahaba didn't even want. And even they were worried. And even يُقَلِّلُكُمْ, meaning Allah even made the Quraysh feel that victory was inevitable. Like look at these losers. They're never going to stand up to us. We've got this. Okay? These guys are the minority. We're going to get them. But what did Allah do? See what I'm saying? So if you feel that, okay, we're thrust in this position, it's very uncomfortable, and we're the minority, nobody's going to stand up for us, nobody's going to protect us, this is perfect. لَقَدْ نَصَرَ اللَّهُ, this is here in Surah, لَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِبَدْرٍ وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ. Allah assisted you in Badr when you were dhaleel, literally, adillah, meaning this is the perfect position, actually, which you don't understand. When you feel that way, we're in a corner, we're being backed up, nobody likes us, nobody wants us, nobody's going to support, is exactly when what happens. It's exactly when Allah will help you. It's exactly what happens when you're adillah, when you have nothing and you have no power and you're saying, oh man, if we stand up for this issue, everyone's going to look at us and say, bad guys, right? But guess what will happen? Allah will help you. Because believe me, even here in America, there is only, the reason why this voice is so powerful to us is because of the media, because of, education circles are almost always liberal. Illa ma sha Allah. Do you know what I'm saying? Mostly, all of the educators, from the most part, from high school onwards, and especially in college, are almost always liberal. So they're always going to hound this issue, right? Always. Here's the thing though. Most Americans, the average American, right, are neither Republican nor liberal. They're somewhere in between. And they are now reacting to what they call this politically correct movement, right? That we have to accept things that we really don't accept 100%. If we, no matter how uncomfortable we feel about this, be frank about our views, right? You will see how Allah will help us, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. And maybe that stance, as uncomfortable as it is in the beginning, will be the means of all those undecided Americans, which are actually in the majority. They'll say, hey, you know what? These Muslims are starting to make sense. You see, like I said, the atheists, you have some who are just, they are what they are, they're never going to listen. But you have a lot that may listen. It's up to us to be that, right, that anchor.
But we are a minority, actually, just like these guys.
Exactly.
So majority of
Perfect.
the Americans also do not like us either.
Yeah, that's, unfortunately, this is interesting. I don't know who just did this. Who just did this? Help me here, Google.
What's that?
The CEO of Google, what's his name? Who is it?
He has an Indian name.
I think it's
Oh, it's-
Sundar Pichai.
No, it's someone else then. They just put out, it's in the news, I just forgot, I guess, but they just put out some kind of statistics about how America, the actual cause of death of Americans compared to the things that Americans fear, either by using the internet, looking up things like what could be a threat to you, or by media coverage. 0% terrorists. But media coverage, and in other words, this is just a fear factor. And this is exactly what Shaitan's game is. Yeah, they made us look bad. And they're going to continue. And that's in everything, that's all there in Surah Ali Imran. This is why this surah is perfect for us. Like I mentioned in the beginning, the backdrop of its revelation was when the Prophet ﷺ was talking to Christians. So this is literally, what does Allah say here? وَلَتَسْمَعُونَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا أَذًى كَثِيرًا. That you will indeed hear from those who have been given the book before you and those who associate partners with Allah, like the Hindus, forgive me for saying it, right? You will hear from them what? أَذًى كَثِيرًا, much abuse. You literally hear from them what? أَذًى كَثِيرًا. It's as if literally this promise of Allah, وَلَا تَسْمَعُونَ, if you know the Arabic, there's lam of takir, noon of takir, it's like saying Bayshak, Sofi, Sad, no doubt whatsoever, these people are going to verbally abuse you. They're going to say things, adhan literally means something that hurts you. So it's not like something you just brush off, like, oh, who cares? It's going to hurt you. They're going to say everything about you. You're a terrorist, you're this, you're that, you're intolerant, you're blah, blah, blah. I just clipped on a little YouTube video, a non-Muslim white guy talking about the history of Barbar, where he came from and how he came to India and started the Mughal Empire. The whole thing down there, every Hindu, like, these Muslims, they couldn't leave it alone. Like, oh, you see, they invaded us and blah, 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 blah. Just like the whole, ya Allah, the whole thing is just Hindus. And you see, Muslim. Oh my God. Allahu Akbar. Can we leave that alone for a second? And just as a historical, he's just talking about how this man, where he came from, the empire he started, and it just has to turn into this whole like Muslim invaders and evil people. Blah, blah. So Allahu Akbar. Ajib, the whole thing is, and then you see this is what Allah said. They're going to do what? Abuse you. But then Allah says, what's your job? إِن تَتَّقُوا وَتَصْبِرُوا. Be conscious of Allah and be patient. Be conscious of Allah and be patient. Because لَا يَضُرُّكُمْ إِلَّا أَذَى. This is another ayah, all in Surah Ali Imran. They cannot do any harm to you except that abuse. That's the furthest they're going to be able to do is just verbally say, you're this, you're that, you're the other thing. If you're patient and you fear Allah, you will have assistance from Allah. Allah will assist you. If anything, that negative, you know what happens? It's actually a sign, again, forgive me, I do that because it's the easiest way to understand human emotion. Again, ladies, please don't get offended, but it's like sometimes some of our friends used to tell us, if some girl makes fun of you, it's actually a sign that she likes you. Why? Because she's still thinking about you. She's like, oh, you're this. If she didn't care about you, if I don't like something, what would I do? Right? Rabia al-Basariya, the famous woman saint, she once passed these men who were talking about the dunya, like how bad it is. And she told them, it's a sign you still love it. Because if you didn't love it, you wouldn't mention it. If I really don't want or like something, I don't care. I'm not going to say anything good or bad. It's meaningless to me. You see what I'm saying? So the fact even that they're talking about us that much, mashallah, one simple video and just Muslims are this, it's like, wow, man, we're really that special, mashallah, that you have to give us that much attention. Like they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this. It's like, but they really, really are seeing something in us. If we were nothing, being a minority, like you said, think about it. We're a minority. We're not even, 1% of this country? And they have to talk about us so much? That's actually, you should be happy. Like, wow, I didn't know I was that important. Like, subhanAllah, I'm that scary, mashallah. I mean, it's like, really? Like, it's like you have to talk about me that much? Because there's something there, and they know it. They see it, and they recognize it. So our job, tattaqu tasbiru. Be conscious of Allah. Be patient. Don't worry about it.
So what do we tell our kids? So you tell them what's right and what's wrong, but, I have to sometimes tell them not to verbalize it because, you might hurt, what I say is you might hurt someone's feelings. But,
Sure.
But, these kids are kids. Everything is black and white, so if something is right, it's right. So
فَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ, like as Allah said, don't abuse their gods. Right? Because that'll just, so there is a wisdom, of course, to when and where and how we say things.
this issue, like this.
That issue, right?
That issue, that particular.
Maybe kids are so young, does it even come up? It does.
They see, you see it.
My children are very liberal, so I just tell them I don't support them, but I wouldn't hurt them either.
I mean, that's what we say, we don't hurt them and this.
Yeah, you just tell them that, like, in the law of our land, in the secular country, you can't really do anything about it. However, we don't approve of it as a lifestyle and as our own choice. We have to say categorically, yes, it's a sin. Just like committing fornication or stealing or anything else is a sin. If a person does it or not, that's between them and Allah. They can make tawbah. They can do many things. But we can't acknowledge, it's important to acknowledge what it is. That's the whole point.
But that's the thing, these days you can't even say it's wrong.
Exactly.
So
That's the biggest issue.
So that's the thing, then it's tricky to tell them, that are you suppressing, what are they thinking? That, we can't say it, that
Right.
it's wrong.
Yeah, I would say to tell them that don't involve yourself in the discussion until you know how to debate. Okay? And if you know how to debate and you know how to discuss the issue, then you can discuss it with these people. Other than that, just leave it alone, because otherwise they're just going to overwhelm you. And then you may feel so scared and pressured that you just end up saying whatever they want to hear. Okay, but if you know how to debate, and this is a process, that's what I mean, we have to teach people in a very methodical way. There's a way to debate and to talk about. It's unfortunate that I have to give people like references to almost like semi-alt-right leaning, like people like, what is his name, Jordan Peterson, who was a psychologist who's, he gives a lot of talks in universities. He talks a lot about these kind of issues of the Western world, but he's kind of alt-right leaning. He's not really, but he does lean that way because they're the only alternative out there that has a voice. Unfortunately, our people are Trumpies, basically. But he has intelligent arguments against these things, that he actually has the courage to talk about it, and he says it intelligently. You see, we don't have that voice. That's also done on purpose too, by the way. It's all part of the big oil machine that we have out there. I'll give you an example. I have a person I know from Chicago. His name is Sheikh Ubaidullah Evans. He's an African-American brother who studied in our madrasa, and then he went to Azhar. He graduated from Azhar University. He came back to Chicago, and he's a very articulate, intelligent, and he's African-American. He's from here, obviously, right? So NPR even, a quote-unquote liberal station, they had some kind of program where they wanted a Muslim scholar to come on and talk about Islam. He was a candidate. But they chose this other guy, Ahmed Rehab, who is from CARE. He's not a scholar. He's and he's kind of, he has kind of like an accent. And why did they choose him over Ubaidullah Evans? Right, it fits the stereotype. He's a foreigner. He doesn't speak English that well. If they see an African American who's not only from here, but he's an Azhar graduate. He knows Islam. You see, and he can articulate it, and they can't say he's a foreigner. This is one of us.
Yeah.
So it's all done on purpose. They do these things on purpose because they want that narrative to be continued so that people will be scared. And the reason why I'm saying that is there are, what's his name, Sherman Jackson. He has a YouTube video where he talks about homosexuality, and he does it well. He does it well. He explains the issue without compromising, and he does it intelligently, and he does it well. He's a professor at the University of Los Angeles. So, but do you think that's going to get coverage? You think that's going to be put out there like, hey, let's use him? It's not going to happen. Why? Because it just ruins the whole narrative of everything, So I wouldn't expect it from them, but I would say we need to do our job, which is like you said, you have children. Let's teach them how to handle themselves appropriately in a certain situation, Certain times it's not worth arguing about. So you just say, إِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. It's okay. There's other people who may want to listen. Then you have to learn basically the art of how to debate or how to bring up certain issues with somebody. That is an art after all. And that's why, like I said before, not all the Sahaba did it either.
In general, would you encourage debating these issues? Because, what I've seen is that, so say someone like ourselves, like so not a scholar, rarely do we have, the nuance to really debate something, in a knowledgeable way. And debate, quite honestly, rarely changes people's minds. So, and you see it like when you say when they choose panelists on TV, a lot of times, the vast majority of times, they're picking non-scholars, right? People that might be a journalist, but they're brown and they have a Muslim name, right? And even when they're debating, they're often overmatched by people that are expert, in that medium, right? So for me, like engaging in debate seems very fruitless.
Yes. Now that too, you're right, and there are exceptions to the rule always. There are times when if there's nobody there to defend the deen, then you should do it. However, again, in situations like that, everything has to be done intelligently. It's the media. This is what people use as their source. They're going to put you in front of an audience, and they do it on purpose. You're already the odd man out. Okay, you're already the one that everyone is predisposed to dislike. So your presentation has to be that much better. Okay, so in situations like that, like if it was on the street, I would say any Muslim can defend Islam. Okay, but if it's in a situation like that, then I would say we have to handpick who is going to get in front of a camera and talk about Islam.
As a Muslim living in America, is this a subject you want to be on the offensive with?
Yes, actually, because if you look at the Prophet's dawah, like you said, sometimes you have to understand that you're right. The nature of the jidal is that, okay, this is going to be a controversial statement, but dawah is very similar to warfare. Okay? It literally is, how do all fights start? Arguments, right? And someone makes a point, and one says, well, I'm not changing, and then that's how the fight starts. Am I right or am I wrong? So dawah literally is, in its nature, it's actually not passive. Even if you're being kind, even if you're showing good character, and even if you're delivering the message calmly, you're still being aggressive because you're attacking the idea. You see what I'm saying? You're attacking a conclusion, and you're saying that this is wrong. So is that a passive or aggressive? It's aggressive by its nature. Now, how you do it, of course, that's the beauty of the Quran, because so Musa alayhi salam is told to go to Fir'aun, idhab ila Fir'aun, but at the same time he's still told to say do it, qawlan layyinan, to speak in a soft and nice manner. You're being aggressive, but you have to do it in a way that you don't look like the what? You look like the one who is in complete control. You look like the one. That's another part of dawah. As for a Muslim, we're representing Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You don't want to leave the room as the one who lost the battle.
No, but my point is in the issues of Islam.
Should that be it?
Yeah, should this be in the top 10 even? I mean,
Yes, but only, like I said, relegated to very particular people. Even then, again, jidal and these kind of things is only for particular people. It's not for everybody. So it should not be prioritized for the whole ummah. Meaning, like, you're not going to tell the entire community. But here's the other problem. When you're attacked, you have to defend yourself.
yeah, no, I agree
Then
with
it
that.
becomes a priority. Okay, then so we do have to give every Muslim the ammunition, at least, so to speak. Again, just a metaphor here, to be able to defend themselves intellectually, right? So that those issues come up, we should at least be able to defend ourselves. As far as the public debates and things like that, yeah, that should only be certain people. Absolutely, 100%. And like you said, like you gave a perfect. I remember watching on an Arab news station. They had this debate between this one lady who supposedly is like, an atheist Arab woman, and then again, not a scholar, some guy who's supposed to represent Hamas, right? And they're arguing about Islam, and then she's trying to say that Muslims were always aggressors, and that even the Crusaders were just defending themselves. Like that was just, the Crusades would have never existed if the Muslims didn't go into Spain. So the guy's argument against her was so ridiculous. It was all emotional. It's just, well, who's attacking who now? They're the ones who are bombing us. They're the ones who are doing this and doing that. And it's like, that's exactly what they want. If I was there, I'm just saying, I would have said, okay, let's take religion out of the picture completely for a second. Let's not even talk about religion. I want you to historically name me one group of people, whether they are a tribal society, civilization, that was never aggressive. Name me one. Forget religion for a second. Name me one society in history of mankind, in the history of man, who was never aggressive. So why are we playing this game of who has blood on their hands? Because every society, every people in human history have blood on their hands. You see what I'm trying to say? You have to redirect the question. It's like you can't play their game. If you play their game, you lost the battle. You're just becoming emotional and, we're just defending ourselves. And forget that. Okay, you're on a high horse. You guys are so good and Muslims are so bad. Tell me one civilization, not even, like I said, even a tribal society that's never been aggressive. And then let's talk about who's bad and who's good. All of humanity, unfortunately, have blood on their hands. Oh well, that's the world we live in. So then the discussion doesn't become who is aggressive and who is not. Let's look at it from a different angle. You see, do you understand that? But you have to be trained. Like I said, you have to have those nuances. You have to know how and when and where to debate with people and where they're coming from. You can't just throw this guy like they did on the television. They do it on purpose. It just gets emotional and I knew it. These Muslims are crazy, right? Inshallah, may Allah make it easy. But for the average Muslim, though, definitely we have to educate to the point where we can at least defend ourselves. Because the challenge now is literally our youth will be themselves questioning their own iman, the validity of their Islam. You see what I'm saying? So that doesn't mean you're going to get up and we're going to tell every Muslim to go out and go on whatever channel, this channel, that, and debate this person and that. No, leave that for people who are trained for it, inshallah. May Allah Ta'ala make it easy. You know what happened when Ahmed Didat did all that, right? See, as much as I appreciate, I used to read a lot of his books when I first became Muslim too. But the problem with him, again, he made a lot of mistakes. Meaning even about Islam. So, I mean, it's kind of, that's what happens when you don't fill that void, then just anyone will get up. Even the same thing with Zakir Naik. I don't know if anyone here is a fan of him. I'm not trying to say he's a bad person. But if you really analyze a lot of his arguments, and even about Islam, I mean, he's definitely a literalist. He's following the more Salafi-minded. He definitely is that, okay? And a lot of his arguments that he uses, if you really analyze it, are not that good. But it's impressive to people because he can quote the Bible. Well, so what? Anyone can quote the Bible. What does that mean? Like, I can just spend my nights reading the Bible, and then that's not how the arguments aren't made. Just even that. Why is okay? I'll end here. I promise. It's 1:00. Give me the 1:00. Why is using the Bible an ineffective way of arguing with Christians, because the assumption is that they use the Bible as their source of theology and law. They don't. Why do you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Takhadul arbaba min duni"? Why do they take their padres, meaning their priests and as gods other than Allah? What does that mean? The source of their theology, the source of their law is not the Bible. It's the Pope for Catholics, for instance, or it's the pastor for this denomination. So why, again, the Bible says homosexuality is wrong. The Bible says that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. Why don't they follow that?
There's an author, Christopher Hedges, and he looked closely at the evangelical movement in the U.S., and he said that, and he's a divinity school graduate, he said they never discussed the Bible with him because, one, they didn't know it, and like you said, they don't use it as their source.
Exactly. That's the whole point. That's not because they'll say, well, maybe the Bible says that, I don't know, but my pastor told me it's okay. You see what I'm saying? So why are you arguing with them with the Bible when they don't even accept it themselves as a source? As you said, that's not their source of theology. That's not their source of law. So you could quote the Bible all day long. And what does it mean to them? Nothing. So why even use that line of arguing that, oh, the Bible says this, Bible says, they could care less, They could care less, honestly. You see what I'm saying? So the other day I met a brother from, Bangladesh and ICP, and he's like, it's just the way that a lot of common Muslims think is just unbelievable. Like, I had explained to him because he's asking me my background. I was trying to be unsociable at that time. He's like, where are you from? I said, oh boy, here's this question. I said, I'm American. Like, really American? I said, yes, I'm the only Muslim in my family. I had to put it that way. Then it gets even deeper. Yes, okay, I'm from European background, Gora, like English, German, yes. So how's that possible? Right, that's the first thing, right? Like, how's that even happen? Then the second thing was, what was the question? He said, well, what religion were you before? I said, none. What? Your parents? I said, none. My parents aren't religious. And then that really boggled him. And I said, look, Yar, according to the statistic, Pew Research, okay, almost half of Americans have no religion. And that too, he's like, what? No, they're all Christian. I said, no, they're not. I mean, there's a large group of Americans that he's trying to tell me, right? Like trust me, like even according to statistics, a lot of Americans have no religion. So, but it's like, a lot of Muslims are just in this kind of like world where it's like Europe is Christian, America is Christian, the whole Western world is Christian. I mean, if you're talking about Europe, the statistics are even larger. 70 to 80% of the populations are atheists. You can't call Europe a Christian. It's just, unless it's Poland or like Eastern Europe or something. But like England, are you kidding me? France? I mean, these guys are pukka atheists. I mean, like they could care less about God. You mention God to them, they'll just laugh at you like, oh, ha, 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 that's very funny. What are you talking about? Like God, who's that? You guys still believe in that stuff? That's literally. But to an average Muslim, what would they think? They're Christian, but they're not. You're talking to a different audience. They're not, and if they are Christian, again, they're not. They're just like, mashallah, the gospel of prosperity. Private jets and mashallah and and Jimmy Swaggart, Allah Akbar, all these guys, there's their, may Allah make it easy. Okay, so thank you for coming. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us this sort of really, mashallah, the more we get into it, this is your da'wah one. Yes, this is your foundation. You're living in a Christian, or not a Christian, but let's say as a society that was based at one time upon Christian, as they call it, the Judaic-Christian civilization, right? That's another, I love that, really. But yeah, this is how you give them da'wah. This is your foundation. This is your lesson, inshallah. Primary thing, in tattaqu wa tasbiru, right? Just be conscious of Allah Azza wa Jal. Be patient. At the end of the day, this will all work out in your favor. Antum adillah. The fact that you're a minority, the fact that you are in a weak position is perfect. That's why Allah will help you. Assalamu alaikum.